Okay, so here we go with the exercise review for number 21. And as we get started, I just want to remind us briefly of our imperfect active indicative forms and eventually the middle passive. Remember the cues for the imperfect are the augment, the epsilon, happens in middle passive and active. And then on, s, n, amen, ete, on, middle passive, main sa, ta, metha, sta, and ta. So just a brief reminder as we're jumping right in now to the parsing for this set of exercises. Now we'll see immediately that nearly every form is imperfective, as you would expect for practicing. But we see with number 1, from baptizo, we see that reflected here, bapti, baptids. And then the augment tells us that's an imperfective form. So imperfect, and then on SN, second singular form, of course, active indicative. You were baptizing, translating past tense with the action ongoing. The reference to time is not there. So it very well could be that whoever was doing this baptizing is finished and not still baptizing 10 years later or whatever. But time is not a factor. So oftentimes these verbs will have been completed, but the emphasis is being placed on the action ongoing at that given time period. So you were baptizing. Eguon from akuo, we see that here, guo, on. Well, we know on, sn, amen, ete, on. So could be first singular or third plural, imperfective, because we've got, instead of the epsilon, the alpha becomes eta, still augmenting. So it's an imperfect active form. Athelete, amen, ete, notice that stays the exact same. So if we're not sure of the form, we still know second plural, and comes from thelo. So the eta is the augment here. Imperfective, active, indicative. Next, esodzeste, augmented form. We see sods, we know from sodzo, metha, sta. So middle passive set of endings and second plural. Next, epoie looks very similar, except we have an augment, so we know it's not present tense form. It is an imperfective, third singular form, active indicative. He, she, or it was doing. Exebeles comes from ekbalo. Looks a little bit different, but we see on s, second singular, imperfective form, active indicative. Second singular, imperfect, active indicative. You were casting out, and because the preposition's already attached to the verb in the lexical form, that's why there's a change to the kappa, and the augment comes here, technically speaking. But you'll recognize that it changes from the present tense form. Therefore, present cannot be a present tense form. So imperfect, active, indicative. The rest is just the endings on, sn, amen, ete, on. So second singular. Next, ason, third plural, imperfect, active, indicative from amy. I would recommend just memorizing all those forms of amy. Not too much extra trouble at this point. Number 8, coming from puruamai. When we see this, we typically think probably deponent in most of the other verbal forms that it appears in. Main, so we see our secondary endings, main saw ta, methus ta, main first, singular, augmented form, imperfect, deponent, middle idea, indicative, I was going. So still past, but more like an active verb there. Exousi, this is the only non-imperfect form from echo. And how do we come up with the future tense form? Well, we have echo. And if it's going to change to this, probably there is a sigma embedded in here. So it becomes hexosi, amenete usi. So we know third plural from echo, future. It's there. It's just not there. Third plural, future, active, indicative, they will have. Next, eperoton from eperotao can be, instead of on SN, I think on similar. So don't get too confused there. What happens in the first singular happens in the third plural for the primary active endings. And it's active indicative. So it could be I was asking or they were asking. Moving forward into the warm-ups. First one we see epoptidzin autos on SN, augmented form, third singular, imperfect. He was baptizing. Who? Accusative, and it's plural, so them. Next, daimonia, bala, exebalon. So we start with our verb. We recognize that as either first singular, on SN, amenete on, or third plural from ekbalo. So it could be I was casting out or they were casting out. Daimonia, bala, many demons. Plural form, plural form. Moving along, ebaptidzanta, hupalto. Remember, there's technically an omicron there, but it drops because it doesn't like to stand next to another vowel. It's easier for pronunciation. So methastutanta, we're in the secondary endings. And that tells us that we have certainly an imperfect form, but also a middle passive form. In this case, purely passive. So third plural, imperfect, passive, indicative. They were being baptized by him. So the action of the verb is not being directly related to the subject. The subject is not doing the verb. It's the action is being acted upon the subject. But anyway, moving along. Similar construction. Verb, prepositional phrase. Methastanta, same ending, so third plural. From erkomai. So in this case, third plural, imperfect, indicative, middle form, so technically deponent, translating more active idea, which is difficult to come across in the imperfect sometimes. Something like they were coming to him. Next, we see verbal negation and then verb. And then our secondary passive, secondary endings. And the augment there, of course, the krina from krino, to judge. So imperfect form, first plural, we were judging. we were not judging. And in this case, I've translated here as if it's more of a middle idea. If it was more of a middle, context would determine, would be we were not judging for ourselves, with more of an emphasis on the subject. If you remember the middle, what the middle is doing. If it was more passive, it would be something like we were not being judged. So if you had that, that's okay. Just trying to get the idea across for the imperfect by doing what I did. We were not judging for ourselves. So perhaps that, but if you put the other, we were not being judged, that's okay as well. Next, for if, verb, amaneta, second plural, augmented form from pistuo, fairly obvious here. So for if you were believing who? Moses, Mosai, verb, and then emphatic form of a pronoun, dative case, in me. So the only thing left really to remember or to know is the sigma. So it's a future tense, technically. So second plural, same subject. If you are believing Moses, you will believe in me. And what happens a lot in the future tense is that it conveys a command or a conditional idea. So it's best to say you will believe in me, but in an actual translation, it may come out as you would believe in me. Both ideas are, that's really the essential meaning is coming across with the conditional. Best at this stage to translate it as a future, you will believe. Next, LLA, notice that's an augmented form from laleo, O-A, third singular. So he was speaking, dative plural, to them, accusative, singular form. So our direct object. And then we have our indirect object of the verb. He was speaking the word to them. Moving into some translation. You'll recognize this first one right away, probably from scripture. But our post-positive, but this one, that's why I put he. This one was speaking, elegan, third singular augmented form from Lego. So was speaking, and best is to say that's functioning like a pronoun here. But he was speaking concerning a long genitive prepositional phrase, concerning the temple of body of him. So he was speaking concerning the temple of his body. Number 2, kai pas haachlas erketo pras auton. See prepositional phrase, always good to note that. Underline the verb, double underline probably the entire subject here, and of course kai. So and you could say the whole crowd or all of the crowd. This is all the subject, however you put it. Was coming. It's a deponent verb from erkamai, of course. Main sata, third singular. So all of the crowd was coming to him, and edidaskin. We'll recognize that. Didasko, I teach. And we have our augmented form, third singular on SN. So, and he was teaching them. Oionois us, accusative plural. He was teaching them. Next, postpositive de, so and. Ekuon. So we could have, knowing it's from akuo, we could have on SN, omineta on. We could have first singular, could also have third plural. So we should go searching for a subject to figure out which one it is. And if there was no subject, context would determine. But here we see the Pharisees are the subject. So this is technically a third plural verb. And the subject is here at the beginning. So, and the Pharisees were hearing these things. All something. So all of these things. Functioning here is accusative, direct object form. They both agree. Number, gender. So all of these things. You could say all of these things. I supplied the word of because it makes a little bit more plain sense in English, though recognize that I didn't put of there because of a genitive form. There is no genitive form. It's just one of the easiest ways to convey what's happening here with the direct object. So number 4, a son. They were, simple memorization work there from Amy, third plural. So 4. There were many, could say many people, we don't know. So for there were many, and this technically functioning predicate nominative plural form, but it comes after a form of to be. So for there were many, and a kaluthon auto. Well, we see we have a kalutheo, I follow, augmented with the eta. So that becomes imperfect. And it could be because of this, on SN, omineta on, first singular, third plural. And in this case, I've chosen primarily to say they, so I translated it as a third plural. They were following him. But note, down here, a little bit difficult to see right now, you could also say I was following him. That would be just as well, because we don't have full context. But let's move along to number 5. So, ekapa de, postpositive. Here's our subject. So Jesus was loving. Ekapa, third singular, augmented form, imperfect. Jesus was loving who we would expect to see exactly what we see. In accusative form, so he was loving Martha and her sister, hetes tetain, remember, first declension, so it's not brother. Adelphe, adelphos would be brother, adelphe, sister, adelphe, adelphes, adelphe, iota subscript, adelphane, accusative singular, her sister, and Lazarus. You could drop and put, and Jesus was loving Martha, her sister, and Lazarus. That would be just as fine, or just as well. Number 6, Kai, and third singular form, perotao, I ask, be instead of so that's how we know it's an imperfect form, third singular. And he was asking who, direct object form, that's what we want. He was asking him. And then what was he asking him? Well, we see our question mark ends here. What name to you? In other words, we could supply Amy to make better sense of it in English. What is your name? And he was saying, the person answering this question, and he was saying, to him, technically, he is saying to him. I've just chosen to reflect it the same because of context. You could say, and he is saying to him, Legion, legion, name to me. In other words, legion is my name. For, or because, or since, many, we are. But remember, it makes better sense to make it predicate nominative, come technically after this. So for, we are many. Moving into number 7. For, autos, probably our subject of, egenosken. Underlining the verb twice. It's from genosko. On SN, third singular, and we have an augmented form, so it's imperfect. For, he knew, technically was knowing, what was, third singular, imperfect form of a me, what was in the particular man. For he knew what was in the man, presumably referring back to number 6, and that's why he was asking the name, because Jesus knew there were demons in the man. One thing to note here, often this will be translated for he knew, which is making a decision that this imperfect is definitively finished, in which case it is now because we're looking at the event from the future. The event happened, in other words. So it's fine to say that. But in the Greek, the construction is there. How we translate it ultimately is neither here nor there, probably. But what's going on with the tense here, the imperfect is used because it's talking of a past action with demonic presence ongoing to that point in the story. So it's drawing the reader along and using it this way to really emphasize narrative, that up to this point in the story, the man had a demon for a long time. We don't know how long, plural, demons. And up until this point, he still has them. And Jesus knew that. He was knowing what was in the man. So that's the purpose there of the imperfect verb. Probably enough on that for now. Let's move to number 8. Peroton, auton, hoi mathetai auto tain parabolin. So we see, as we're reading, nominative form, plural, with the genitive modifier, of course, our verb. So, augmented form, I ask, from I ask, could be first singular, could be third plural, on as in nominative on, similar enough, remember that. Here, Our subject is plural, so this is obviously functioning as a third plural in this case. So his disciples were asking him, accusative case, we're asking him the parable. And it makes sense to supply this. Technically, the preposition that could be written there, I'll transliterate it, peri, could be written before tein parabolin. It's not, but the idea carries. So his disciples were asking him the parable. In other words, his disciples were asking him about the parable, presumably the one which he had just finished speaking. But without further context, we're not ultimately sure. If we were to open the Bible, we would, of course, but isolated sentence. Moving along, number 9. Kai metatauta periepate ha Jesus inte Galilee. And we'll stop there. Semicolon. Technically, should be semicolon. And with or after this or these, but we know dauta, that is plural. So, and after these things, peripateo, I walk around, I live. Notice the change. It's a little bit different, but it's an indication that it's not the present tense form you're looking at. And oase, third singular. So imperfect third singular. Subject here. Jesus was walking in Galilee. For negation of our verb from thelo, to will or desire. He, same subject, he was not willing to walk in Judea because aorist, third plural, they were seeking him, the Jews, to kill. In other words, because the Jews were seeking to kill him, accusative, direct object there. Number 10, make clear so it's a little bit more apparent on the screen. Final sentence for this exercise. Hoi men un sunel fontes. We can, I guess we'll keep reading until the comma. Eroton auton legontes. And then direct speech, kurie. Note, that's an epsilon, so that is a vocative case. It's direct address. They're talking directly to, presumably, Jesus. The disciples in this case. So let's go back to the beginning. Man own, many ways this could be translated. Man on the one hand or indeed, un, therefore, or then. So you can say then, indeed. It's a participle. Just note that it's given for us here. When they had come together, erotao could be first singular or third plural, onasen, aminet on, augmented form, because we already know, presumably because of the translation and some other factors that we'll see, it's plural. So this is a third plural in this case. They were asking who? Him, accusative direct object, saying, that's a participle. That's why the weird endings you don't quite recognize yet. Move past that for now. We're asking him saying, direct speech, Lord, and I'll just go through a very wooden literal translation. If at this time you are restoring the kingdom to Israel. Question. So, Lord, let me get the spotlight out a little bit easier. Lord, are you restoring the kingdom to Israel at this time? And I've done this because you could say, Lord, are you at this time restoring the kingdom to Israel? I think either way, the idea comes across that they want to know right now if Jesus is restoring the kingdom to Israel. Perhaps that comes across a little bit better if you front it, put it more forward in the question to show a little bit more emphasis. Because it's possible that this phrase here, prepositional phrase, in this time or at this time, could be at the end. It's not, so perhaps it's there to show this is the most important content of the question. They want to know this a lot. Lord, are you at this time restoring the kingdom to Israel? Because they want the answer to be right now, in other words. So, as always, 11 through 20 are there. Excellent and good practice. If you've done any of those and want to have a discussion, reach out to me as always. But that will conclude our imperfect indicative exercises, exercise number 21. Well done. Take note of the things that you did well and let yourself feel good about those things. And that which you were unsure of or just could not figure out, make a note of those things and maybe go back one more time and figure out what your mistake was, work backwards to figuring out the right answer, and then go from there in terms of having some more targeted things to be able to review for moving forward.